I'm Will Aubrey. Time for another edition of the Improbability Engine. My buddy Joe Darnell is here, and we'll lead off with our moment of what?
Well, Will, I'd be remiss if I did not mention as my moment of what the confusion around the Oscars and the presentation of Best Picture. It's almost become too joked upon to make too many cracks about it. But for those who don't know, Oscars happened. Best Picture presentation. They call up the wrong people, and the reason they do that is not because the presenter Warren Beatty did something incorrect or that they had typed something incorrect on the screen, because they don't type that. They have an independent group that seals all those records. PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a very prestigious firm. One area that they messed up on is they handed the wrong envelope to the presenters. They handed an envelope that was for Best Actress. And they read the envelope because that's what you're supposed to do. And it was the wrong movie. And so they did get it straightened out, but not before the producers of La La Land got up there and accepted the award and had begun thanking people when they came out and said, no, that's incorrect. It's actually a different movie. So,
Moonlight,
which apparently is Oscar winner for Best Picture. Go out and see it and go out and see what you think. It's.
And by the way,
yeah.
One other thing about the Oscars, there was a movie, and I think the title was Florence Foster Jenkins.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and it's about a woman. I looked this up.
Uh-huh.
She was a singer, but her claim to fame was that she couldn't sing. She was horrible. And
well, how's that? She'd be a great pop star nowadays.
It's
auto-tune.
Look up the Wikipedia article about her because it's hilarious.
It's definitely. I think I know the movie you're talking about, and you're right. She was somebody who wanted to be a famous singer and had all the tools necessary to be a famous singer.
Money,
except for a singing voice, which is
it would be like me singing, which we're going to get in a moment.
Of course we were,
because my moment of what's coming up. But go ahead and finish.
No, the last thing I want to say on it is, you know what? A round of applause to the Oscars. Having done some live presentation stuff and being, doing a podcast, being on the radio at different times, it's difficult to do what they do year in and year out and not make a major mistake. And this is the first one since, I think, 1964 where they've made a mistake like this. So, you know what? That's a good streak. I know everybody's going to focus on the negative, but that's a long time to go between major flubs. And frankly, I don't think I've gone 15 minutes. So, Will, what's yours?
Okay. I was listening this morning to Doyle and Debbie.
Of course you were.
And they were doing a melody. And I just love it.
Doyle and Debbie, for those who don't know, they're a very highbrow roots country duo that, well, if you get a chance, go to YouTube and check out Doyle and Debbie, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I think it'll be very, very obvious pretty quickly.
They're at the Station Inn every Tuesday. Anyway, in this melody, there's the segment that Debbie sings, okay? And it goes something like this. Pass the gravy. Aren't you happy with your life? More chicken, darling. Is it filled with pain and strife? You can't mind your manners if you can't mind your wife. But it gets better because Doyle sings the next part, okay?
Okay.
Eat your peas. And shut your pie hole, woman. That was my truck. And you're not supposed to drive. 3 DUIs in one weekend. That's your record. You're just lucky that dog is still alive.
Like I said, folks, the highbrow folk country kind of a scene that Will Aubrey finds himself in. What was the moment of what to that? Or were you just listening to it and that just struck you?
Oh, it's. I would think that most people who hear me sing those words would be going, "What?"
All right, so that's to you, our listeners, your moment of what? Well, let's start off, Will. Let's talk about Murray State. I was pretty surprised by it. Surprising news coming out of the women's program. Murray State has parted ways with longtime coach Rob Cross. The team lost out on a bid to the OVC tournament. They had a pretty disappointing year. The talent was there. There seemed to be some things going on, and to crash out the way that they did on the last day of the season and not make the OVC tournament seems to be the straw that broke the camel's back. What are your thoughts?
I really think it was probably in the works for a while. Rob has not been particularly successful since the championship year that he won. And I love Rob. He is a great guy. He is a good friend of mine. But at the end of the day, it comes down to wins and losses in college basketball. It always does.
Yeah.
And so, he has a losing record as a head coach, and eventually that will catch up with you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just from my personal standpoint, I too have nothing but positive things to say about Rob Cross, the person. He's a good man, and I've never personally had anything but positive interactions with him, and I wish him well no matter what happens next in his career. And he's the kind of guy that he'll land on his feet doing something somewhere. He's just that kind of guy. He's a really good fellow. But it brings up some of the questions that we've got for the women's program. There are a lot of rumors and speculation about coaching searches and how that's going to go. What do you think? Do you think that the women's program at Murray State, do you think that's an attractive job?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I suppose to answer it, I would have to say, to who? I mean, to a lot of people, I would think it would be an attractive job. Murray State has nice facilities, and
probably the best facilities for basketball, for women's basketball in the conference. I don't think there's any other program that has. You might look at Belmont, but the women have access to the practice facility. They've got the Regional Special Events Center, the bank, the CFSB Center. They've got a lot of positives going with it, but they just don't have the track record of sustained success that you'd like to see from other programs. I just don't know how I'd quantify it.
Well, I'll put it this way. When Jody Adams came in, she thought it was an attractive job.
Right.
And in her first year, she took them to the NCAA tournament. And the next year, they won a conference championship under Rob because Jody left after one season.
Right.
So it's a place where you can win titles.
Absolutely. And say what you want about the Ohio Valley Conference and other sports, and women's basketball, there's some talented teams. There's some good programs that come through there that are interesting. I mean, there's some interesting teams. So, I'm curious to see what Alan Ward does with this. I don't think he's the kind of guy that would let Rob go and not have a pretty good plan in place for when that happened. He doesn't strike me as we'll let Rob go and then we'll see where we are then kind of guy.
I agree.
So hopefully we'll see a hire relatively soon. Somebody who can come in and right the ship and take the Lady Racers to that next level and back to success.
Indeed. The men play tomorrow night, and they play Tennessee Tech. I'm calling for a victory. It should be a close game.
Yeah, Tennessee Tech did beat Murray State in the regular season this year at Tech.
The Racers have gone south for the last several games, and it's not for the reasons that most people think it is, and it's not for the reasons that I thought it was.
Okay. We need more information than that, Will.
I understand, and I'll get to that because I would tell you that they haven't been playing defense. and they take rushed shots. But that's been true all year long.
Right.
That's not anything
They
new.
do that when they're winning.
Yeah, they do that when they're winning. That's not anything new during the losing streak. But Bryce Jones has made something like 8 of his last 35 three-point attempts.
Yeah.
And he's gone from shooting over 40% to shooting down in the mid-30s,
right,
due to the bad streak that he's been on.
And for those of you who have some grasp of statistics, there's a big enough sample size for the season that big of a percentage change tells you how big of a slump that he personally is on. Now, you look at his form, the form looks great. It looks like he's been shooting it all year. It's just not
But
going
for the
in.
last 5 or 6 games, he hasn't been able to throw it in the ocean.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I'm not saying, it's all Bryce's fault.
I think it's just endemic of what's going on with all the guys. I mean,
between the two of them in the last game, Bryce and Jonathan Stark missed 23s.
And for those of you who are complaining about the volume of threes, I think it's just part of the offense. What was surprising? Okay, let's talk about the last game against UT Martin, because that to me sums up the season so far for the Racers. The first half, they were atrocious, worse than atrocious. They were befuddled. They were lost. They seemed their energy was taken from them. They didn't move. And this is a team that was, at that point, fighting for a place in the tournament. Do you know what I'm saying? There was an opportunity for them to not even make the OVC tournament.
But they stood around on defense and gave up
They didn't
shots.
Exactly. And as bad as they were in that first half, and we could argue that that's probably as bad as they've looked all season, and there's been a couple really, really bad games or halves this season. I think if you look at it the second half, you see a lot of the positives that fans have seen when they've won games. They've got some scorers that can absolutely score. They've got some young guys who have a lot of talent, but can't seem to get over the hump and be contributors consistently.
Jalen Dupree's coming on strong.
This is the guy that I thought we were getting all year long. I knew it would take him a while to acclimate to D1, because it is a huge jump from high school to D1, especially when you go from being the best player on the floor in high school to being just another player on the floor. You've got to develop a different level of preparation. You've got to do all the things differently. The game is faster. There's just so much that goes into it. Against Martin in the second half, you saw what Jalen Dupree has been promising in his game. He can score. He does have a touch. He does have the ability to be physical in the post without fouling. He's athletic enough. He's strong enough. And you saw him start to put those things together. What did he have? 20 points, 8 rebounds, something like that? I mean, holy cow. That guy, that's a great game for anybody, let alone a freshman. Now, mind you, I'd hope to see it back in January. I'd hope that he'd be one of the guys that can make that quick transition. And he had some trouble. But boy, did he look good. Now, think about how good this team would be with a guy like Dupree, who's able to score in bunches, next to a guy like Miller. And how does that change the dynamic of this team? Well, it changes it dramatically. We saw Miller had early foul trouble, had a lot of trouble establishing his offense early on against Martin. And generally speaking, this season, if that happened, the Racers were going to lose because they'd have no interior scoring at all. Without Miller, there's nothing. What we saw was a step made by Dupree to give some help to Miller down low. That can only be positive going forward.
Agreed.
Jonathan Stark what can you say? He's the best player on the team.
Well, there's no question about that. And
you wonder
while
if he's
he
putting
did
too much on his shoulders.
While he did miss 10 threes against Martin, he hit 5. Right. He was 5 of 15. He took 15 of them. And, 5 of 15 is not great, but it's not horrible.
No, it's respectable. I mean, there were nights when Isaiah Cannon hit 33% of his threes.
Yeah.
People don't remember it because they remember the game in Clarksville against P where he came out and hit his first, 6?
Yes.
I mean, you tend to gloss over. Jonathan Stark's a great basketball player. He needs help. And we've been waiting for some of those perimeter guys to step up. We had hoped it would be DeMarcus Croker. Well, now Croker's out for the year. We'd hoped Jones would be able to up his scoring, and he has. But Jones is never going to be the prolific 20-point scorer that a Vincent Rainey was.
Here's the thing. With Croker out of the lineup,
Right.
you've got a situation, and Coach McMahon yesterday in his press conference talked about the possibility of starting Dupree. But that gives you a situation where if you start him in Croker's spot, then your front line is 3 big guys.
Yeah.
And that may make it difficult to defend the perimeter.
Well, you'd almost have to bump Miller to the 3. I don't see there's any other way to do it. I don't know if you could put Dupree at the 3. At 6'8", I don't think he's got it. I don't think his game translates.
I don't
well
think
to that.
Miller can defend that spot.
Well, the question is this: have we shown any propensity to defend the 3 all year long?
But I'm assuming
Right.
that he was talking about putting Dupree
Into Sanchez's spot.
Well, I was assuming he was going to put him in Croker's spot,
Right.
for McGee. But if he starts him in place of Sanchez, then you've got Dupree, Miller, and McGee, and maybe that's okay.
Well, the only question I would have then is who plays the role of the defender on the post with Miller and Dupree in at the same time? Miller's done okay, but you can't have him playing hard defense down low because you can't have him picking up fouls. You almost need him to just back off and not do, you know what I mean? Put his hands straight up in the air and don't foul because you've got to have him on the offensive end. Sanchez has done a little bit more of the physical on-body defending. It's been mixed success. It hasn't been, a raving victory every time he goes in and plays defense. But he has been the best post defender we've had this year, in a year where any kind of positive on the defensive end is miraculous. So it's a question for me. I don't know. I like the idea of rewarding the guy who came in and played well, trying to build on that success, and especially for a young guy. Hey, yeah, you've shown me something. You've taken that step. I'm going to give you confidence and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Especially if, and for all intents and purposes, Breon Sanchez is a level-headed kid. This is not going to be something that I don't think is going to upset him too much. Nothing of what I've seen would indicate otherwise.
And Tennessee Tech, they aren't world beaters. That's a winnable game. And then if you get past Tech, I think you're looking at Moorhead in the next game. Yeah. And Moorhead, they're beatable. It's not like we're talking about playing just great teams here.
Right.
The Racers, everybody at this point has given up on continuing the consecutive winning streak. And I will agree it's unlikely that they win 4 games in a row this week. But it's not impossible.
Right.
I would give them maybe a 60% chance against Tech and 50% against Moorhead. And then they get to Friday night, and I guess they would be playing Martin.
Yeah.
They've already beaten Martin once. They can beat Martin.
And almost came back on Martin from a 15-point deficit to win at senior night at Martin. So
they're certainly capable. They're as capable as any of those other teams of getting to the final.
Yeah.
Now, can they beat Belmont? Probably not, but who knows? And Belmont could get knocked off by somebody.
Absolutely. And you look at the teams on the other side of the bracket. I mean, Belmont doesn't have it easy. I just look at those. I look at the teams. This is anybody's tournament. It really is. For the first time in a long time, I look across the board and I go, yeah, there's not an unbeatable team in this field.
Now, talking about Racer basketball.
Yeah.
Next year, if you look at what's coming back, there's some reason for concern. But my biggest concern is, what if Jonathan Stark leaves? He's got that option. He graduates in May, and he could go to Iowa State. He could go to someplace like Louisville, who has taken graduate transfers in the past. That would be a severe blow.
Well, let's look. It seems to me there's two questions here. All right, let's look at what's coming in next year. Leroy Buchanan, JUCO guard, athletic slasher scorer, will look to be a direct replacement for G. McGee / DeMarcus Croker. He's 6'4". He's got a big body. I think that he can play that role really well.
Right.
I think he's going to be the leader of the pack going into the clubhouse for that spot, for that wing spot.
And you've got Hawkins.
Hawkins will play, I think, and fill a role that Jones is playing this year.
Okay.
So you'll have Stark and Hawkins as your dual point guard, right? Both can be ball handlers. You can run different sets for either one, where you can ISO, you can change guys out, do whatever you need to do. And I think physically, Hawkins will be able to defend bigger players a little bit better than what Jones can do. Jones is just limited. He's limited to it. God did not see fit to make Jones 6'3", 210 pounds. He just didn't. Now, that being said, I think he's a great basketball player. I think he's one of those guys that he is deceptive in a lot of things that he does, but he is what he is. You're not going to get, he's not going to go and sky over somebody and dunk. He's not going to, that's not his game. That's not what he does. But you look at Hawkins. Hawkins is 6'1". He's a little bit bigger than Jones, has a year of D1 under his belt. So he's going to come in. I think you're going to see a progression down low. You've got Miller coming back. Now, you can't tell me Miller's not going to be preseason all-conference. In fact, I think that if you look at it, he might be in the running for player of the year next year.
He might be.
I mean, this is a guy that you put some development around him.
If Stark is back, he'll be the preseason player of the year.
I think that's probably right. So there you've got a couple guys. You got a newcomer on the perimeter, or you've got one of the guys who are younger making a step up and making a leap to the next level. That could happen. I don't know. Maybe a guy like Taylor can make that step. Maybe a summer into the system, because he never did get a summer. He was a late signing, a late Q guy. You bring him in, hope for that a year in the system, and then a summer of intense workouts can get him to that next level. If it's him, we're good, because he's shown a lot of skill and a lot of talent. Down low, you're looking at Miller, and then you've got Dupree and Sanchez. If Dupree steps up defensively, I think it's a no-brainer that he has to start next year. If Sanchez can make any kind of steps offensively and regain some of that mobility that he's been working back, ACL tears are a 2-year injury. Juwan Long taught me that. I mean, what we saw in Juwan Long was nothing compared to what we'd seen from Juwan Long at different times athletically. Now, he made up for it by being very savvy and extremely tough. He's the kind of guy, he was an in-your-shirt defender. But that's a different animal. So if Sanchez can come up and play some offense, then I think it's his position. If Dupree comes up and learns some defense, then I think he starts at the 5. And you've got a really good sub coming off the bench that you can go to and you feel comfortable with. And it leaves a guy like Gilbert Thomas as a question mark. Where does Gilbert Thomas come in? I think he plays probably as a substitute for Miller, to be honest with you. I don't think that's a terrible thing. I think he brings energy, immediate energy off the bench. I think it takes some of the pressure off of him having to defend, and you can just have him do the things that he does well. Especially if it's an up-tempo game. You can just turn him loose, and we've all seen what he can do when he runs the floor. He is incredible. And then you got the freshmen. And I never like to bank on freshmen because you just don't know what you're going to get. You just don't.
That's true, regardless of what the
No matter
recruiting
how good
gurus
they
say.
Nobody thought that Isaiah Cannon would be as good as a freshman as he was. Nobody thought that Cameron Payne was going to be the freshman that he was. But
And everybody thought that DeMarcus Croker was going to be all-world. And
Right.
while he was a good player, he
Right.
was not all-world.
well, and you look at a guy. There have been so many guys that you look at and you go, "Oh man, this guy could be a beast. He could do so much. He could," and the tools are there. But recruiting is not a science; it's an art. I mean, it really is. Guys like Jamar Avant. I mean, you're talking about a guy who at 6'8", 230 in high school was one of the best high school basketball players I'd ever seen commit to Murray State. He had a soft touch. He was quick on his feet. He did a lot of stuff. Reminded me of Nino Johnson when Nino Johnson was a freshman, right? Or whenever he was a senior in high school. You look at him, you go, "Holy crap! This guy's coming to." I mean, that's a big deal. This guy can really play, and got here and didn't do anything. Nino Johnson had a pretty good career at SEMO, but was never the dominating player that he probably should have been. So it's not one of those you go, "Well, this guy's going to be it." You look at what you got and you think you can make that step. And these guys they've got coming in are pretty good.
Moving along.
Yeah.
Callaway County's Lakers play in the regional tournament tomorrow night, 7:45 p.m. They play Paducah Tillman. They've played Paducah Tillman already this season, and they fell behind by a large margin early in that game. But if you take the first quarter away, that was a 1-point game.
Right.
Tillman is incredibly athletic.
Yep.
Jerome Reed,
Yep.
they have him in the middle. He is extremely difficult for Callaway to deal with.
He's a tough matchup.
He has long arms, and he's athletic and just very hard for them to deal with. And then Rodriguez Thomas.
Yeah, Rod Thomas is.
He's a great shooter, and they have other guys that can shoot
Absolutely.
it too.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got 6, 7 guys that can play and play well, and they will be difficult for Callaway to deal with. But nobody would have believed what the Lakers did last week.
I wouldn't have.
I mean, I came in at halftime of the girls' game, and Murray's girls were ahead of Marshall 30-10, and I just shook my head, and they're just so dominant. Then Callaway's boys got up 30-10 on Marshall's boys. Who would have ever believed that? The 2 previous times they played, Marshall ran away and hid from Callaway early in those games. And the Lakers, fought to try to get back in those games, but they just blitzed Marshall last Thursday. If that team shows up tomorrow night, they can beat Tillman.
Yeah, I was looking at the pairings, and the first thing that came to my mind is, of all the district champions, Callaway got the hardest draw. They just did. I mean, you look at the other district runner-ups, and none of them are as good as Tillman, I don't think. I mean, Tillman, honestly, is one of the better teams in the region.
But if the Lakers beat Tillman, they get Mayfield or Hickman in the next round.
World is your oyster then. Those are 2 teams that match up. Whoever wins the Tillman-Callaway game, that second-round matchup is one of those where you have to tell your guys not to look ahead.
Well,
because those are teams that you should be able to beat. You should be able to beat.
Mayfield's very good.
Mayfield's very good. But when you compare Mayfield to Tillman or to McCracken or to Marshall,
right?
I mean, it's just there is a step down, and that's not a knock against Mayfield. Mayfield went to All A this year, and they're a very talented team, but it's just hard to compare against a team like Tillman. I mean,
now
the winner of that team, the winner of that game will be the favorite in the second round versus either Hickman or Mayfield.
I think Camden Price should be on the all-purchase team for Callaway. He's had a great season. And then I also want to mention the coaching job that Terry Birdsong and his staff have done at Callaway this year.
Absolutely.
They've done an amazing job, as good if not better than what they did 2 years ago when they got to the state tournament. And I think Terry Birdsong should be Coach of the Year.
I think that's probably true. I look at that and then there's no way that you could. I mean, if you'd talked to me at the beginning of the season and said, yeah, Terry Birdsong is going to lead the Lakers to a district tournament championship. They're going to beat Marshall on Marshall's home floor for the championship, walking away, I'd have probably called you a liar. I mean, because there was, I honestly, I didn't look at this team and see what I see now. And give him and his staff credit, man. They took these boys, they gave them the right environment, and the players stepped up into their roles and bought in to what their roles needed to be, and they've developed themselves, they've pushed themselves, they've been coached well. You got to just give them a hand. I mean, that's really impressive. I'm really impressed at what Terry Birdsong has done at Callaway this year, and you're right, he should be Coach of the Year.
Anything else?
You know what? No, I look forward to next week. Maybe we'll have a women's basketball coach, and we'll have a better idea of what's going on going forward, and you know, see what's happening out there. Maybe something good will happen. Maybe the Lakers will win it, and we'll talk about them going to the Sweet 16.
Okay. That concludes this edition of the Improbability Engine.